Morning begins softly in the Australian bush, not with drama, but with distance. A pale line of light spreads across the spinifex, turning each blade silver at the tip, while the red earth still holds the cold of night. The air smells dry, dusty, and faintly metallic, the way it does before heat takes command. Somewhere beyond the low mulga scrub, a kangaroo lifts its head, ears turning independently toward sounds too small for a human to separate. The scrape of claws on gravel, the wing beat of a crow, the faint movement of something traveling with purpose through the grass. Then a shape appears on the ridge, lean and quiet, neither fully dog nor fully wolf in the way it carries itself. The dingo does not enter the landscape like an outsider. It moves as if the country has already made room for it. That is the paradox at the heart of this animal. The dingo is often treated as a symbol of wild Australia, yet it did not begin here. Its ancestors arrived with humans several thousand years ago, commonly placed around 4,000 years in the past, long before foxes, rabbits, cats, cane toads, camels, pigs, and the other modern invaders began reshaping the continent. By the strictest definition, the dingo was an introduced predator. But time is not a small detail in ecology. 4,000 years is long enough for prey to learn its pressure, for hunting routes to become woven into seasonal movement, for fear to settle into the behavior of other animals. The dingo arrived as an outsider, but it became part of the operating system. Across open country, that role is not always visible in a single kill. It is written instead in absence. In places where dingoes remain strong, foxes often become less bold, feral cats may move more cautiously, and smaller predators are forced to live under the shadow of a larger one. This is mesopredator suppression, the ecological rule that a top predator can hold smaller predators in check, not simply by eating them, but by changing how they move, hunt, breed, and take risks. A fox that must avoid dingo tracks loses time. A cat that hunts under threat avoids open ground. A smaller predator that cannot roam freely cannot slaughter native mammals with the same efficiency. The dingo's power is not only in its jaws, it is in the fear it spreads ahead of itself. That fear matters because Australia's small animals have suffered brutally under newer invaders. Many native marsupials evolved with predators, but not with foxes and feral cats hunting at modern densities across fragmented habitats. A bilby, a bandicoot, or a young wallaby is not helpless, but it is built for a very specific world. A world of cover, scent, silence, burrows, and night movement. When cats and foxes pour through that world without enough pressure above them, they become a second invasion moving on 4 quiet feet. The dingo changes that equation. It does not become gentle. It does not stop being a predator. But by standing above smaller hunters, it can reduce the total predatory storm that falls on the most vulnerable animals. This is where the story becomes uncomfortable. For generations, people have trapped, poisoned, shot, and fenced against dingoes to protect livestock. From the human side of the fence, that fear is understandable. A dingo pack can test weak points in a flock, read hesitation in a young animal, and use endurance rather than speed to wear prey down. Its body is built for distance, long legs, a deep chest, sharp senses, and the ability to travel vast, dry ranges where heat punishes every unnecessary movement. It hunts alone, in pairs, or in loose family groups, shifting strategy with the country. In cooler hours, it can cover ground almost silently, nose low, ears forward, reading scent the way a tracker reads footprints. But when dingoes are removed too heavily, the bush does not simply become safer. Sometimes the opposite happens. The smaller invaders step into the empty space. A culled landscape can look calm at first. There are fewer howls at night, fewer tracks crossing station roads, fewer yellow eyes caught briefly in headlights. But ecological damage often begins quietly. Foxes grow bolder along creek lines. Cats patrol the edges of grassland where native rodents feed. Rabbits may increase, chewing vegetation down and opening the ground, which then exposes smaller animals even more. The removal of one predator can loosen several knots at once. What looked like control becomes release. What looked like protection becomes an invitation. The dingo itself survives by reading limits. In the desert, it avoids the worst heat by moving at dawn, dusk, and night, saving energy when the ground becomes hot enough to burn through the day. Its large ears help release heat, while its lean frame prevents the body from carrying more mass than the environment will allow. Around waterholes, it knows that every animal is forced into vulnerability sooner or later. Kangaroos, wallabies, emus, reptiles, and smaller mammals all leave information behind. Scent on mud, crushed grass, a feather caught on a branch, the nervous pause of prey that has heard something but not yet seen it. A dingo does not need the overwhelming force of a crocodile or the venom of a snake. Its weapon is patient intelligence, spread across a landscape too large for panic. There is also a social intelligence that makes the animal harder to categorize. Dingoes can live alone, but they are not simply solitary wanderers. Family structure matters, especially where larger prey or territorial pressure requires cooperation. They communicate through scent marking, body posture, and long-distance howls that carry through cool air like a map being redrawn in sound. A howl is not just a noise. It is spacing, warning, contact, and claim. It tells other dingoes where bodies are in the darkness. It tells smaller predators that the night already has an owner, and this is what makes the dingo different from the invaders that came later. Foxes and feral cats entered a wounded continent already altered by grazing, clearing, fire changes, and fences. They arrived not as a missing piece, but as added pressure. The dingo, despite its origin, had centuries upon centuries to become pressure that other animals could recognize and respond to. It became danger with a place. Invasion is not always about where an animal came from. Sometimes it is about what happens after it arrives, what it displaces, what it releases, and whether the living system can bend around it without breaking. So the first invasion in this story is not clean, and that is why it matters. The dingo forces us to look past the simple label of introduced animal and ask the harder ecological question, does this predator unravel the bush, or does it hold part of it together? Out on the ridge, as the sun climbs and the red earth begins to glow, the dingo pauses one last time before slipping into the scrub. Behind it, unseen, foxes and cats move differently because it exists. The old invader has become a shield against newer ones, but other arrivals do not protect anything. They just kill. In the dry season rivers of northern Australia, the water does not move so much as weight. It lies in long green pools between walls of paper bark, pandanus, rock, and baked mud, shrinking slowly under a white-hot sky until every surviving animal begins to understand the same truth. The river is no longer a road, but a trap. Fish crowd into deeper pockets, insects gather near the margins, frogs call from damp cracks after sunset. On the warm sandbar, almost invisible until it chooses to move, a freshwater crocodile rests with its narrow jaws pointed toward the shallows. It looks like something left behind by an older Earth. a clean line of armor, muscle, patience and teeth, carrying a body plan refined through deep time, while entire worlds rose and disappeared around its ancestors. The freshwater crocodile is smaller and slimmer than the famous saltwater crocodile, but that makes it no less perfectly built for its own country. Its long, narrow snout is shaped for quick strikes at fish, insects, crustaceans, frogs, reptiles, and anything small enough to be seized before it understands the water has opened beneath it. Its eyes and nostrils sit high on the skull, allowing almost the whole animal to disappear below the surface, while still watching and breathing. Its body is cold-blooded, but not passive. Each day is a careful negotiation with temperature. Morning sun charges the muscles. Midday heat drives the animal into shade or water. Evening opens the hunting window again, when the river edge becomes busy and the crocodile can spend energy with purpose instead of wasting it against the climate. For millions of years, this strategy has worked because the rules were familiar. A frog-sized body near the bank meant food. A soft shape moving in shallow water meant opportunity. The crocodile did not need to ask whether prey belonged. Its senses were built to detect movement, vibration, scent, and contrast, not to read the recent history of biological invasion. And that is where the tragedy begins. Not with weakness, but with success. The crocodile is doing exactly what evolution trained it to do. It waits at the edge of water. It sees a squat, slow animal moving in reach. It strikes. The cane toad was never meant to become a national disaster. In 1935, it was brought to Queensland as a biological control, a living solution for beetles damaging sugarcane crops. The idea sounded simple enough. Introduce a predator that would eat the pest, but nature rarely obeys the shape of a human plan. A small founding group of toads, imported from Hawaii and bred for release, became the beginning of an expanding front that moved out of cane fields and into floodplains, woodlands, gardens, billabongs, roadsides, and remote river systems. The toads did not remain where the problem was. They became the problem, spreading through northern Australia with a stubbornness that seems almost absurd until you remember how well amphibians can turn water, warmth, and mass reproduction into territory. The cane toad's power is not speed or beauty, it is chemistry. Behind its head sit large parotoid glands loaded with toxic secretions, a chemical defense that evolved in another world against predators that had time to learn the warning. When threatened, the toad can release milky toxins containing compounds that interfere with the heart and nervous system. For animals that share its native range, bright caution and bitter experience can become part of survival. For many Australian predators, there was no inherited memory, no ancient warning written into instinct. The toad looked like prey, smelled like prey, moved like prey, and punished the bite only after the decision had already been made. At the river's edge, the crocodile's jaws close fast. The teeth are not built to chew, they are built to hold. A normal frog would vanish in a hard swallow, pulled into a digestive system strong enough to break down bone and shell over time. But the cane toad turns that strength against the predator. As pressure crushes the toad, toxin smears across the mouth and throat. The crocodile's ancient equipment has no useful answer for it. What follows can be shockingly quick. The animal that seemed carved from prehistoric endurance may begin to weaken within minutes, losing coordination, drifting strangely, or lying still where it should still be alert. There is no dramatic duel, no fair contest, no predator-prey balance shaped over thousands of generations. There is just a fatal mistake made at the speed of a feeding reflex. In some river systems along the cane toad invasion front, This mistake has repeated often enough to leave a mark on entire crocodile populations. Researchers monitoring freshwater crocodiles in parts of the Victoria River system recorded sharp declines after cane toads arrived, with some sites losing far more crocodiles than others. The pattern matters because it shows how invasion can strike through behavior, not only through competition or habitat destruction. The toad does not need to chase crocodiles. It does not need to outbreed them in the same niche or steal their nesting beaches. It simply appears as a new prey item inside a predator's ancient search image, and the predator's own hunting machinery completes the damage. That is the brutal irony. A crocodile lineage survived the asteroid age in one form or another, endured climate swings, changing rivers, shifting prey, and the rise of mammals, birds, and humans. Yet in a northern Australian pool, a palm-sized amphibian introduced within living memory can kill one because the crocodile has no deep evolutionary conversation with that poison. The old predator is not stupid, it is historically unprepared. Its instincts are not wrong in general, they are wrong for this one new animal. Some individuals may learn, some populations may show signs of adjustment over time. Conservation teams have even experimented with taste aversion training, using sickening but less lethal baits to teach crocodiles that toads are not food before the invasion front fully arrives. That small human intervention says something important. The tragedy is not just that cane toads kill. It is that they arrive faster than many native predators can adapt. Evolution can teach, but it often teaches by removing the animals that make the wrong first choice. By late afternoon, the river looks peaceful again. Dragonflies skim the surface. A turtle's head rises near a log. The sandbar cools by degrees, but the silence has changed. The ancient shape at the water's edge is no longer only a symbol of survival. It has become evidence that survival depends on meeting the right enemies. The freshwater crocodile was built for ambush, drought, heat, hunger, and the old rhythms of northern rivers. It was not built for a toad carrying a foreign chemical weapon through the shallows, and that same poison is now aimed at Australia's largest lizard. Heat changes the shape of the Australian landscape before anything moves. By late morning, the rocks shine as if they have been polished by fire. The spinifex throws thin blue shadows across the sand, and every animal that wants to survive must understand the temperature of the ground beneath its body. In this country, life is not only about teeth and speed, it is about timing. A reptile that leaves shelter too early moves slowly in the cold. A reptile that stays out too long becomes trapped inside its own rising body heat. Somewhere between those dangers, a goanna emerges from a crevice and begins to hunt with the alert confidence of an animal that has spent millions of years reading the desert through its tongue. The parentia is the giant version of this design, Australia's largest lizard, capable of reaching more than 2.5 meters in length. It moves with a strange mix of power and nervous precision, body held low, tail trailing behind like a counterweight, legs pushing the chest high enough to clear the hot ground when speed matters. Its forked tongue flicks constantly, collecting chemical traces and delivering them to the Jacobson's organ in the roof of the mouth, where smell becomes direction. A footprint, a dead animal, a nest, a burrow, a reptile hiding under bark. All of it leaves information behind. The goanna does not simply see the world, it samples it. That makes goannas extraordinary hunters, but it also makes them vulnerable to a new kind of mistake. A monitor lizard is built to investigate movement. It raids eggs, digs into nests, takes insects, small mammals, reptiles, birds, carrion, and almost anything it can overpower or swallow. In the old Australia, this appetite made sense. A predator in a dry, unpredictable continent cannot afford to be too delicate. Food may appear suddenly and vanish just as quickly. A goanna survives by being curious, fast, and opportunistic. But when the cane toad arrives, the same instinct that once kept it alive becomes a trap. A cane toad does not need to outrun a goanna, it only needs to be bitten. Its squat body, slow movement, and size make it look like a perfect meal for a reptile that grabs first and evaluates later. But behind the toad's head are toxin glands loaded with chemical defenses that many Australian predators never evolved to recognize. When a large goanna seizes an adult toad, the pressure of the bite can smear toxin into the mouth almost immediately. The lizard's hunting system, refined for speed and opportunity, has no ancient warning label for this prey. It has found food, and food has turned into poison. The consequences have been severe in parts of northern Australia. Large goannas, especially species living along floodplains and river systems where cane toads spread in high numbers, have been among the predators hit hardest. These lizards are not minor background animals. They are top-level hunters in their own ecosystems, controlling eggs, carrion, smaller predators, reptiles, and ground-nesting prey. When they disappear, the damage does not stop with them. Food webs loosen, scavenging patterns change. Animals that were once pressured by goannas may increase, while other species lose a predator that helped keep the landscape balanced. The death of a single hunter can become a quiet rearrangement of the whole community. This is what makes the goanna's crisis different from the crocodile's tragedy. The crocodile waits and strikes from water. The goanna actively searches. It crosses open ground, climbs trees, tears into rotten logs, digs into soil, and follows scent trails with almost obsessive focus. It is not just meeting the cane toad by accident. It is built to find exactly this kind of moving package of protein. The invasion has turned the goanna's intelligence against it. Curiosity becomes exposure. Hunger becomes risk. The tongue that reads the world so well now leads the animal toward a signal it cannot properly interpret. But conservationists found a way into that system, and the idea is almost strange enough to sound impossible. Instead of trying to remove every cane toad from the landscape, which is unrealistic at continental scale, they began trying to change the predator's decision before the fatal encounter happened. The method is called conditioned taste aversion. A goanna is offered a very small cane toad, small enough that the toxin dose is not lethal, but unpleasant enough to cause sickness. The lesson is simple, brutal, and biologically familiar. That taste equals nausea. After one bad experience, the lizard may avoid larger toads later, including the adults that could kill it. In human terms, it sounds like teaching a wild animal food poisoning. In ecological terms, it is more elegant than that. It uses a learning pathway that predators already possess. Animals do not need a textbook to understand that a meal which makes them violently sick should not be repeated. Taste aversion is one of the strongest forms of learning because it protects survival directly. A predator may forget a harmless sound, but it remembers a poisoned meal. Conservationists are not giving goannas new instincts from nowhere. They are creating the missing first lesson, the one evolution did not have time to write. The image is remarkable. Humans, after introducing one of the most destructive amphibians in Australian history, are now trying to reprogram wild predators before the invasion front reaches them. It is rescue work, but also a kind of apology written in biology. A goanna that takes the bait, becomes sick, and later refuses a larger toad may carry that lesson back into the scrub as a living correction. It still hunts, It still raids nests, follows scent, and moves through the heat like a scaled intelligence machine. But now, one shape in the landscape has been marked as danger. This does not make the cane toad problem disappear. It does not protect every animal, and it cannot reverse every collapse already underway, but it changes the story from helpless loss to targeted adaptation. The goanna's best chance may not come from fighting the invader directly, but from learning disgust before curiosity kills it. That is a strange thing to say about one of Australia's most powerful lizards, yet it fits the new world perfectly. Survival is no longer only about strength. It is about learning fast enough to survive an enemy that arrived too recently for instinct to understand. As the sun drops, the rocks begin to release their stored heat, and the goanna moves again. Its tongue flicks over the ground, tasting dust, insect trails, old blood, dry grass, and the chemical ghost of animals that passed hours before. It is still a hunter, still ancient in its own right, still one of the great reptile shapes of the Australian continent. But now its future may depend on a lesson delivered through sickness, memory, and one tiny toad that was small enough not to kill it. For some animals, survival came down to learning what not to eat. For others, it came down to one thing: hiding from the world entirely. On Rottnest Island, the morning arrives gently, carried in by salt wind and the soft scrape of dry leaves along the coastal scrub. Low shrubs twist away from the sea, their branches shaped by years of weather, while pale sand tracks run between patches of shade like narrow paths through a small protected world. In this light, the quokka seems almost unreal. It steps from the cover with rounded ears, dark eyes, compact paws, and that famous expression humans cannot resist reading as happiness. The mouth curves upward, the face appears open and harmless, and the whole animal seems built to disarm whatever looks at it. But the smile is not a defense, it is not confidence, it is not a secret strategy. It is simply the shape of a small marsupial's face. And behind it sits one of the darkest truths in Australian conservation. The quokka survives in large numbers, not because it can defeat the invasion, but because on this island, the worst invaders never gained the same power. The quokka is a small macropod related to kangaroos and wallabies, but built for a quieter life under dense vegetation. Its body is compact and low, with powerful hind legs, small forelimbs, and a tail that helps with balance rather than dramatic speed. It feeds mostly at night and in the cooler edges of the day, browsing on leaves, stems, grasses, bark, and whatever plant material the island can provide. On Rottnest, water can be scarce, especially during dry periods, so survival depends on using shade, conserving energy, and extracting moisture from food. Like many Australian mammals, the quokka's daily rhythm is shaped by heat as much as hunger. In the bright middle of the day, it retreats into dense cover, avoiding the worst sun. When evening softens the ground and the air cools, it becomes more active, moving through scrub with the cautious confidence of an animal that knows the island's rules. Those rules are very different from the mainland's. Across southwestern Australia, quokkas once occupied a wider range of wet forests, swampy thickets, coastal heath, and dense undergrowth. They were not designed for open exposure. Their best defense was cover, vegetation thick enough to hide movement, shelter young, and break the line of sight between prey and predator. In the old landscape, that made sense. Native predators existed, but the quokka's world still offered hiding places and familiar dangers. Then came a new kind of pressure. European red foxes were introduced for hunting in the 19th century. and feral cats spread across the continent with their own quiet efficiency. These predators did not need to be large to be devastating. They were patient, adaptable, and perfectly suited to hunting small mammals at night. For a quokka on the mainland, the smile meant nothing against that. A fox does not care whether prey looks innocent. A feral cat does not pause because an animal is rare, charming, or loved by tourists. It reads movement, scent, size, and opportunity. A small marsupial moving between feeding patches becomes a target. A juvenile leaving shelter becomes a risk. A population already squeezed by habitat loss, changed fire patterns, and drying refugees can be pushed downward by predation until only scattered pockets remain. This is the cruel mathematics of invasion. A predator does not have to kill every animal to collapse a population. It only has to remove enough adults and young year after year that recovery becomes slower than loss. Rottnest Island changes that equation because water stands between the quokka and the full force of mainland invasion. The island is not rich in the way a rainforest is rich. It can be dry, windy, exposed, and harsh. Food quality shifts with season. Fresh water is limited. Vegetation must endure salt, sun, and browsing pressure. Yet the island has one enormous advantage. It does not carry the same permanent army of foxes that transformed so much of the mainland. Feral cats, once a concern on Rottnest, were eventually removed, leaving quokkas in a place where the most destructive introduced predators are absent or controlled. That absence is not dramatic on camera. It does not roar, strike, or flash venom, but it may be the single most important thing the island gives them. This is why Rottnest can hold the world's best-known and largest quokka population, while many mainland groups remain small, fragmented, and vulnerable. The island is not a paradise because every need is easily met. It is a refuge because one category of death has been kept away. In conservation, that difference matters. A refuge does not have to be perfect. It has to be safer than the world outside. For quokkas, safety means enough dense cover to rest, enough food to maintain breeding, and, above all, fewer predators capable of turning every night movement into a gamble. The biology of the quokka makes this isolation even more important. Like other marsupials, it invests heavily in young that begin life tiny and undeveloped, continuing growth in the pouch. Females can breed efficiently when conditions allow, but that does not mean a population can absorb relentless predation. Every joey lost before independence is time and energy removed from the future. Every adult female killed is not only one death, but a broken line of potential offspring. In a stable refuge, these losses are balanced by survival and reproduction. On the mainland, where predators, fire, habitat fragmentation, and climate stress overlap, the same life cycle becomes much more fragile. There is an uncomfortable irony in how humans see the quokka. Visitors come to Rottnest for the face, the bright-eyed animal that appears to smile for photographs, the tiny celebrity of the scrub. The image travels around the world as sweetness, but the real story is not cute. It is geographic luck shaped into conservation. The quokka's most powerful shield is not a claw, toxin, armor plate, or bite. It is separation. It survives because a strip of ocean did what teeth and speed could not do. It kept the invasion out long enough for the animal to remain common in one place while fading from many others. As evening settles over Rottnest, the island becomes active in small sounds. Quokkas move through the scrub, chewing softly, pausing often, lifting their heads when gulls call overhead or branches shift in the wind. Their bodies are ordinary in the best possible way. Herbivores doing the quiet work of staying alive, turning tough plants into movement, warmth, milk, and another generation. Nothing about them looks like a symbol of collapse. That is what makes the truth harder. Some species disappear loudly, under chainsaws, guns, poison, or flood. Others vanish by becoming easier to catch than the world can afford. The quokka's smile hides that history, because faces are easy and ecosystems are not. To understand this animal, the camera has to pull back from the selfie distance and show the water around the island. The missing fox tracks in the sand, the thick scrub that still holds cover, and the mainland forests where survival is far less certain. The happiest-looking animal on Earth is not safe because happiness protects it. It is safe where the invasion failed to arrive. Sometimes survival is not strength, speed, or intelligence. Sometimes survival is simply being somewhere the invasion never reached, and while some hide, others turn the invasion into a feast. Dawn in eastern Australia does not begin quietly. Before the sun has fully cleared the gum trees, before heat rises from the paddocks and cicadas take over the day, a sound breaks through the woodland that seems almost too human for the bush. It starts as a low chuckle, rough and rising, then builds into a rolling chorus that spills across fence lines, creek beds, roof gutters, hollow branches, and open pasture. To a stranger, it sounds like laughter. To the kookaburras, it is not joy at all. It is a boundary being drawn in sound. A family group is telling the world that this territory is occupied, that the perches, hollows, hunting grounds, and morning light already belong to them. After the tragedies of invasion, the kookaburra enters the story as something different. Not a victim crushed by the new world, and not a refugee saved only by isolation, but an opportunist that learned how to use disturbance. This does not make it harmless, and it does not make human-altered landscapes good. Cleared land breaks ecosystems apart, removes old trees, destroys hollows, and leaves many birds with nowhere to nest. But some animals find openings inside the damage. The laughing kookaburra is one of them. It needs trees, especially for nesting and perching, but it also hunts best where the ground below is visible. A completely dense forest can hide prey too well. A woodland edge, a paddock with fence posts, a roadside with open grass, a garden with scattered trees, or farmland broken by old eucalypts can become a hunting platform. The kookaburra is technically a kingfisher, but it is not the delicate river jewel many people imagine when they hear that word. This is a heavy-headed, powerful-billed hunter of land. It sits upright on a branch or post, watching the ground with patient stillness, then drops suddenly when something moves below. A beetle crossing dust, a lizard slipping through grass, a frog near a drain, a young bird, a small snake, or a mouse in a paddock can all become part of its diet. Small prey may be swallowed quickly. Larger prey is handled with a violence that surprises anyone who only knows the bird by its comic voice. The kookaburra grips, lifts, and beats the animal against a branch or the ground until it stops struggling. That method makes it well suited to a landscape filled with introduced prey. European settlement brought not only predators like foxes and cats, but also rodents, disturbed grasslands, sheds, grain stores, crops, and human rubbish systems that allow mice to appear in large numbers. For a perch and pounce bird, a mouse moving through open ground is not an ecological tragedy in abstract form. It is dinner. The kookaburra does not care that the mouse is introduced, just as the fox does not care that the quokka is loved. Predators read opportunity first. In an altered landscape, The winners are often the animals flexible enough to turn new conditions into food. This flexibility begins with vision and patience. A kookaburra can sit for long periods without wasting energy, scanning from above while the world below exposes itself in tiny movements. Its large head and strong bill make the bird look almost front-heavy, but that design gives it the force to seize prey that many birds of similar size would avoid. A small snake moving across warm ground may be dangerous, but the kookaburra has a practical answer. Strike from above, control the head if possible, and hammer the body until risk becomes manageable. It is not invincible. Venomous prey can still be dangerous, and every attack carries uncertainty. But the kookaburra's hunting style lets it exploit the borderlands where reptiles, insects, rodents, and human-altered habitat overlap. The famous call fits into that same strategy. Territory matters because a good territory contains more than space. It contains safe nest sites, reliable hunting perches, enough prey, and enough cover for a family group to survive year after year. The laugh at dawn and dusk is a broadcast of ownership, often delivered by several birds together. It is sound used as architecture. Instead of building a wall, the family throws its voice across the trees, warning rivals that crossing the invisible line may bring conflict. The timing is not accidental. Dawn and dusk are moments of movement when birds are active, light is changing, and sound carries clearly through cooler air. The chorus turns the start and end of the day into a territorial announcement. The family behind that sound is part of what makes kookaburras successful. They do not always raise young as a simple pair working alone. Older offspring may remain with the parents and help feed or defend the next brood. This cooperative breeding turns a family into a small workforce. One bird can hunt while another watches. Helpers can bring food to chicks, strengthen territory defense, and increase the chances that younger siblings survive. In a world where nest hollows are valuable and competition is constant, staying home can be more useful than wandering into a crowded landscape alone. For the young kookaburra, helping is not sentimental. It is a survival strategy inside a family territory that already works. That does not mean the kookaburra is a simple hero of the invasion story. In areas where it has been introduced outside its native range, such as parts of Western Australia and Tasmania, it can become pressure on local reptiles, birds, and hollow-nesting species. Even within its native range, its success in altered habitats reveals a painful imbalance. The same cleared edges that give it hunting opportunities can destroy the old hollow-bearing trees it needs for nesting and remove habitat for more sensitive birds. The kookaburra wins only under certain conditions. Enough trees left standing, enough open ground to hunt, enough prey moving through the disturbed spaces humans create. This is the uncomfortable lesson of invasion and land change. Ecosystems do not collapse evenly. Some animals vanish, some retreat into islands, some are poisoned by unfamiliar prey, and some step onto the fence post, look down at the new world, and begin hunting. The kookaburra's laugh can sound cheerful because humans hear it through human ears. In reality, it is the voice of an animal that has turned sound, family, patience, and opportunism into survival. It laughs over paddocks where other species have disappeared, not because the world is funny, but because the territory is still worth defending. By full morning, the chorus fades and the bird becomes still again. It watches from a dead branch above the grass, feathers lit by warm light, head tilted toward a faint movement near the fence line. A mouse breaks cover for 1 second too long. The kookaburra drops like a stone with wings. In a continent transformed by invasion, not every native animal is only losing ground. Some have learned to feed on the disruption itself. But the strongest response to the invasion comes from neither a bird nor a mammal. It comes from the one everyone fears. Night settles differently in the suburbs. It does not fall over untouched wilderness, but over roof tiles still holding the day's heat, timber fences silvered by moonlight, fruit trees shifting beside water tanks, and garden sheds where small animals move through gaps humans barely notice. A possum crosses a power line. A rat slips behind a compost bin. Somewhere above a veranda, pressed into the warm darkness of a roof space, a carpet python waits with the stillness of old machinery. It is not dramatic at first glance. It does not chase through the grass or announce itself with sound. It simply becomes part of the structure, patterned scales broken against timber shadow, head resting near a beam, tongue tasting the air in slow black flickers. The carpet python is one of Australia's great generalists, and that is exactly why it belongs at the end of this story. In a landscape rewritten by humans, generalists often become the animals that endure. A specialist may need one kind of prey, one kind of tree hollow, one perfect patch of habitat. A carpet python can use forests, rocky country, river edges, farms, sheds, gardens, and suburban ceilings. It can wait in a tree for a bird, lie near a chicken coop for a rat, shelter inside a roof cavity, or coil in long grass where mammals follow the same paths night after night. It does not need the world to stay pure. It needs cover, warmth, patience, and something warm-blooded moving close enough to make a mistake. Its hunting equipment is quiet, but extraordinary. Along the python's jaws are heat-sensitive pits that can detect the body warmth of mammals and birds, turning darkness into a map of living targets. Its forked tongue gathers chemical particles and delivers them to a sensory organ in the roof of the mouth, allowing the snake to follow scent trails with a precision that feels almost impossible for an animal without limbs. When it strikes, the bite is only the anchor. The kill comes from constriction. Each coil tightens with the prey's struggle, not crushing in a cartoonish burst, but interfering with circulation and breathing until the body can no longer fight. Then the python does what snakes do better than almost any predator on Earth. It turns one large meal into weeks of survival. That ability made the carpet python strangely suited to the invasion. Rats, mice, and rabbits arrived with humans and spread through places where food, shelter, grain, rubbish, crops, and buildings gave them new opportunities. To many native animals, introduced mammals became competitors, destroyers, or predators. To a carpet python, they could also become prey. A mouse in a shed, a rat in a roof, a rabbit moving along a river edge. These are not symbols to the snake. They are heat, scent, weight, and movement. The invasion created damage, but it also created a buffet for a predator flexible enough to use it. This is not a simple victory. Carpet pythons still face cars, habitat loss, persecution, dogs, cats, foxes, and the loss of old, hollow-bearing trees. In some places, they become unwanted visitors because they enter chicken pens, aviaries, or roof spaces. But that conflict shows how close they can live to people. While more sensitive animals disappear when the bush is broken into paddocks and streets, the python can slide along the edges of that broken world and keep hunting. It is not winning because humans helped it on purpose. It is winning because human disturbance made new prey pathways, and the python's old skills still work inside them. Yet the real counterattack goes beyond one python in one ceiling. Across Australia, cane toads have not only killed native predators, they have begun forcing evolution into the open, fast enough for scientists to measure in real time. For snakes, the danger is brutally physical. A cane toad is not equally dangerous to every predator in every size. The larger the toad, the larger the toxin dose. A snake's risk depends partly on what it can fit through its mouth. Snakes do not chew prey into safer pieces. They swallow whole. Their gape is opportunity, but against cane toads, opportunity can become a death sentence. That means body shape itself can become a survival filter. A snake with a relatively large head and wide gape may be capable of swallowing a toad big enough to kill it. A snake with a smaller relative head may be physically prevented from taking the fatal meal. In a world without cane toads, a wide gape can be useful because it opens access to larger prey. After the invasion, the same trait can become dangerous. The invasion does not merely add a new enemy, it changes which bodies are allowed to survive. This is the payoff hidden inside the whole story. Some native snakes are not simply learning to avoid cane toads. Some populations are changing. Studies have documented rapid adaptive responses in Australian snakes exposed to toads, including shifts linked to smaller relative head size and gape, larger body size in relation to head size, and greater resistance to toad toxins. In plain language, the toad invasion is rewriting snake bodies generation by generation. The snakes that can survive are more likely to leave offspring. The offspring inherit the shape, tolerance, or behavior that made survival possible. What looks like a disaster in one decade becomes selection pressure in the next. Evolution is often spoken about as something ancient, slow, and almost frozen in the past. But here it is moving through living animals, inside landscapes people can still walk through. It is in the snake that refuses a toad, the snake that cannot swallow one large enough to kill it, the snake whose body can tolerate a little more poison than its grandparents could. This is not evolution as a museum diagram. This is evolution under attack, messy and uneven, with death doing the editing. The carpet python, lying in the warm dark above a suburban ceiling, becomes a symbol of that larger response. It is not immune to every threat. It is not a perfect answer to invasion. But it shows one path native animals can take: flexibility. It can feed on the animals humans accidentally supplied. It can use structures humans built. It can remain hidden in places where people hear scratching above them and only later realize the house has its own silent rodent control system. There is a dry kind of irony in that. The creature people fear may be the one removing the invaders they never see. And beyond the suburbs, other snakes are answering the cane toad in an even deeper way. Not with anger, not with planning, but with bodies altered by survival itself. Smaller gapes, better tolerance, different choices. The invasion came as poison, but the response is biology refusing to stay still. By the end of this journey, Australia does not look like a continent where every native animal is losing in the same way. The dingo complicates the meaning of invasion. The freshwater crocodile reveals the tragedy of ancient instincts meeting a new toxin. The goanna shows that survival can be taught through sickness and memory. The quokka survives because water kept the killers away. The kookaburra turns disturbance into hunting ground, and the snakes, feared by almost everyone, may be showing the strongest answer of all. Australia's animals are not only dying, some are learning. Some are hiding, some are feeding on the invaders, and some are evolving back. The story is not over, it is being written right now.